I always liked things done right. I guess that's why I ended up being so damn good at what I do. I'm Jackson Turner, and I run Turner Electric. Doesn't sound glamorous, but it's a job I'm proud of. I'm the guy people call when their wires go bad, or their electrical systems are a mess. And I don't do half-assed work. People know me for getting things right. No shortcuts, no corners cut. That's how I built my name, my business, my life. I'm not rich, but I make enough. Enough to keep me and Mara happy. Mara. God, it's hard to even say her name now. I don't even know how to start talking about her, not after everything that's happened. She used to be my everything. The woman I thought I could trust with anything. We'd been married for nearly 10 years. And for most of those years, I thought we had something special. A life built on mutual respect, love, and a hell of a lot of work. She was my partner in everything. I met her when I was still hustling to make my business grow. She was smart, beautiful, and had a spark about her that made me believe she could keep up with my world. She didn't just love me for the man I was then. She believed in me. At least, that's what I thought. But over the last few months, something changed. I noticed it first in the small things, the way she'd start spending more time at the office, the way she'd ignore me when I came home late, the way she'd stop talking to me like we used to. At first, I told myself I was just busy. I've always worked long hours, and I figured maybe she was just caught up in her own stuff. We were both busy, right? Life wasn't exactly easy. But then, I started noticing other things, things that didn't sit right. Like the way she'd go out of her way to hide her phone from me. I mean, we'd been together for almost a decade. She never used to do that. I'd see her swiping through her messages, always turning her screen away when I walked into the room. Or the way she'd smile a little too much when she got a text, and then quickly put it down. She thought I didn't notice, but I did. And then there was the perfume. New, expensive, something I'd never smelled before. It lingered on her clothes, her pillow, even when she hadn't been out of the house all day. I asked her about it one evening, and she just shrugged it off. It's just something I picked up. You like it, she said, all nonchalant. But I could tell she wasn't being honest. Mara's always been the type who gets uncomfortable when things aren't perfect. When I asked her if something was going on, if I was missing something, she'd brush it off with that smile of hers, the one that's meant to smooth over things. You're overthinking, Jackson. Everything's fine. I'm just tired, that's all. Yeah, tired. Tired of me, maybe. But even with all these red flags, I kept telling myself that maybe I was just imagining things. I loved her, after all. I loved her enough to not jump to conclusions. That's the thing about love. It makes you blind to the things you should see. And so, I kept working, kept burying myself in fixing wires and circuits, hoping the problems in our marriage would just go away. But then came that evening. The one that changed everything. The night the phone rang. It was late, well after 6 p.m., and I was still working in my garage. It had been a long day, but I was making progress on a tricky circuit board. I had my hands full, and my mind was on the work. Then, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Mara, at least, I hoped it was her. But no. It wasn't Mara. It was a call from a client. Some emergency. Their entire system had gone down, and they needed me out there now. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my tools, threw on my jacket, and jumped in the van. As I drove out, I glanced at the clock. 6:30 p.m. Mara should have been home by now. But she wasn't. I'd been hearing more and more excuses lately. Late meetings. Last-minute calls. And tonight, she was missing again. I shoved that feeling aside. Focus on the job, I told myself. This client's problem was bigger than anything else right now. But even as I drove through the streets of Phoenix, my thoughts kept going back to her. My mind wandered back to the morning, to the way she'd rushed out of the house without saying much of anything. The way she'd barely looked up from her phone when I asked if she wanted to have breakfast together. She'd been distant for weeks, and I couldn't ignore it any longer. I wasn't the type to snoop. Never had been. But tonight, I couldn't help myself. Something felt off. I pulled up to the client's house and went straight to work, trying to keep my focus on the task at hand. I fixed the issue as fast as I could, but my mind wasn't fully there. It couldn't be. All I could think about was Mara, and how much I hated the feeling that she was slipping away from me. When I finally finished the job, I checked my phone again. No text from her. I drove home, but the moment I passed her office, something caught my eye. Her car. A black BMW, parked outside Golden Edge Realty, where she worked. The lights in her office were still on. It was late. Way too late for anyone to still be working. And that's when I saw him. Daniel Pierce. The guy had always rubbed me the wrong way. He was smooth, charming, and always seemed to have his eye on Mara. I'd noticed the way he'd been flirting with her at last year's Christmas party. A little too friendly for my liking, but I'd pushed it aside. After all, Mara was a grown woman. She could handle herself. But seeing him there, standing in the corner office, the lights glowing behind him, it sent a chill down my spine. Something wasn't right. And I couldn't ignore it anymore. I pulled into the driveway, my heart racing. The house, our house, felt different somehow. Like it wasn't mine anymore. I walked through the front door, my mind still racing. I could hear the soft hum of the fridge in the kitchen, but something about the silence felt off. I looked around and then I saw it. New stuff. Stuff that wasn't there before. A yoga mat, new clothes, perfume on the bathroom counter. Little things that made me feel like I was living in someone else's world. Not mine. I walked to the bedroom, my gut tightening. And there it was. A shopping bag on the bed. I opened it, and my eyes fell on the lingerie inside. Expensive. Impractical. Not something Mara had ever bought before. I froze. And that's when it hit me. The lies, the distance, the way she'd been sneaking around, it all added up. Something was going on. I didn't know what yet, but I would find out. Tonight. I could feel it in my gut. Something wasn't right, and I wasn't going to ignore it anymore. I didn't know exactly what was going on, but all the signs were there. All those little things I'd brushed off, convinced myself they didn't mean anything. They did. And now, looking at that lingerie on the bed, I couldn't pretend anymore. This wasn't just some coincidence. Something was happening behind my back. The anger hit me hard, but I shoved it down. No time for that. If I wanted answers, I had to keep my head cool, stay sharp. I threw the shopping bag with the lingerie in the trash. Maybe it was a little dramatic, but I couldn't help myself. The more I saw, the more I realized just how much she had been lying to me. I grabbed my phone, but before I could send her a message asking what the hell was going on, I saw the time. It was already past 9:30. She should have been home hours ago. I dialed her number. No answer. I sent her a text. Where are you? Why are you still at the office? I knew it wouldn't matter. I knew what she'd say. Just finishing up, or stuck on a call, or whatever excuse she'd been using the last few weeks. She was probably with him. That was the sinking feeling I couldn't shake anymore. I sat there, waiting, like a damn fool. Every minute felt like an hour. I kept looking at my phone, hoping for a reply. Nothing. That's when I made up my mind. If she wasn't going to tell me the truth, I'd find it out myself. No more sitting around, pretending everything was fine. No more waiting for answers that I knew would never come. I grabbed my jacket, headed out the door, and made my way back to her office. My heart was pounding in my chest, but I pushed the fear aside. The truth was out there, and I was going to find it. The streets were quiet as I drove back through Phoenix. The cool air felt sharp against my face when I rolled down the window. My mind raced, but it kept going back to Daniel Pierce. That guy was trouble. He had this way of looking at Mara, like he thought he was entitled to her. Maybe he didn't know she was married, or maybe he didn't care. Either way, I wasn't going to let him get away with whatever he was trying to pull. Not without me knowing every damn thing. When I got to the office building, I parked a couple blocks down the street and walked the rest of the way. I wasn't sure what I was doing exactly, but I knew I had to see for myself. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but it was hard not to when everything pointed in the same direction. The building was quiet, lights on in a few of the upper offices. The front door was locked, but I knew a way in. I had been here before, helping Mara with a few things at her work. I knew the building's layout, and I knew where the security cameras were. It wasn't about being sneaky, it was about getting to the truth. I moved through the building with purpose, trying to keep calm. I was already in a bad headspace, but I had to stay collected. I couldn't let my emotions get in the way. I made my way to the elevator and pushed the button for the top floor. It felt like my stomach was trying to claw its way out of me as I rode up. The elevator dinged, and I stepped out into the quiet hallway. It was eerily still. The door to Mara's office was cracked open. I didn't think anyone would be there this late, but as I got closer, I could hear voices. At first, it sounded like business talk, just a regular meeting. But then I heard something else. Mara's laugh. A little too loud. Too familiar. I froze, feeling like I was standing in quicksand. I pressed my ear to the door, trying to steady my breath. My heart was racing in my chest. I should have left. I should have turned around and walked away. But I couldn't. I had to know. So, I pushed the door open just a crack. And that's when I saw it. Mara was sitting on Daniel's desk, legs crossed, laughing like she'd never laughed with me. The kind of laugh that's way too intimate for a work meeting. And Daniel? He was leaning in, talking to her with that smile of his, like he was already the one she'd chosen. My gut twisted. I don't know what hurt more, the sight of her sitting there so comfortable, or the fact that I wasn't the one making her laugh anymore. I was just a distant memory to her. My heart pounded in my chest, but I kept my eyes locked on the scene in front of me. I didn't want to look away. I couldn't look away. It felt like someone had reached inside and ripped out my insides, just watching them flirt. I didn't know how long I stood there. Minutes, maybe seconds. Time felt warped. But I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't some innocent workplace thing. This wasn't just some late-night meeting or long hours at the office. This was betrayal. Cold, clear betrayal. And then it happened. They leaned in. Not for a handshake, not for a business deal. They kissed. I felt like the ground had dropped out from under me. It wasn't a quick peck. It wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate. It was everything I had feared and more. They pulled apart, laughing, completely unaware that I had seen the whole damn thing. Mara grabbed her coat, adjusting herself in front of the mirror, like nothing was wrong. Daniel gave her that same smirk, the kind that told me he knew exactly what was going on. She didn't hesitate. She kissed him again. Right there, in front of me. I felt sick. But at the same time, I was so damn angry I could barely breathe. Anger wasn't enough though. No, I wasn't just going to get mad. I wasn't just going to yell and scream at her. She didn't deserve that. No. I was going to make sure she felt this. All of it. I waited until they broke apart. And then, as Mara turned to leave, I stepped into the office, quiet as a shadow. She didn't see me at first. Jackson. She froze, her voice faltering. She'd never looked more terrified. When Mara saw me standing there in the doorway, her face went pale. I could see the shock flood her features, like she had no idea how I'd gotten in. But she didn't say anything right away. She just stood there, frozen, like a deer caught in headlights. I couldn't blame her. I imagine it must have been like looking into the face of everything she'd been hiding. I didn't give her a chance to speak though. I wasn't about to let her lie to me anymore. Not after what I'd just seen. Not after everything she'd put me through. Mara, I said, my voice cold calm. Maybe too calm. We need to talk. She opened her mouth to say something, probably an excuse, but I cut her off. I wasn't interested in her words. Not anymore. I was done listening to her lies. I stepped further into the room, letting the door close softly behind me. The sound of it clicking shut felt louder than a slam in the silence that hung between us. Don't even try it, I added. I saw everything. Her face flushed with color, but it wasn't the kind of flush I'd been used to, the kind where she'd be embarrassed or excited. No, this was the flush of someone caught red-handed. The flush of someone who knew they were about to lose everything. I don't know what you're talking about, she stammered, but I could hear the tremor in her voice. The defensiveness was gone, replaced by something else. Panic. She knew the jig was up. I didn't even flinch. You don't know what I'm talking about? I repeated. Okay, let's see. You and Daniel, sitting on his desk, sharing a kiss. Don't try to act surprised, Mara. I saw it. My words hung in the air, thick with accusation. Don't tell me you weren't doing more than talking business. Don't insult me. Her mouth opened and closed, like she was trying to form some kind of explanation. But nothing came out. No, it's not what you think. No, I can explain. She couldn't even meet my eyes. Instead, she just stared at the floor, looking anywhere but at me. It was pathetic. She was pathetic. I shook my head. I thought we had something real, Mara. I thought we were solid. But you've been lying to me, sneaking around behind my back. And for what? For him. For a few stolen moments. She finally looked up at me, her eyes wide, her lips trembling. Jackson, please. Please what? I interrupted, stepping closer, my anger flaring for the first time. Please what? You want to explain how you've been sleeping with him, or how you've been lying to me for months? How long were you planning to keep this up, huh? How long were you going to drag me along, pretending like everything was fine? I saw her eyes water, but I didn't care. She had crossed a line I couldn't unsee. I wasn't going to let her play the victim here. Not now. Not after what I'd just witnessed. You should have told me, Mara, I said, the words sharp as knives. But you didn't. You kept playing me for a fool, thinking I wouldn't notice. You thought you could keep this little game going, didn't you? She flinched at the word game, and for a second, I saw the guilt flash across her face. But then, just as quickly, she blinked it away. Jackson, I never wanted to hurt you. You have to understand Stop, I snapped, holding up a hand. Don't give me that. I've heard all the excuses already. The I didn't mean it, and it just happened. I couldn't stand it anymore. You've been planning this for months, haven't you? All the late nights. The new clothes. The perfume. You weren't hiding it, Mara. You were just hoping I wouldn't catch on. I watched her crumble, and for a moment, I thought I might feel some sympathy for her. After all, this was the woman I married. But no, there was no sympathy. Not anymore. All I felt was disgust. I never wanted it to be like this, she whispered, her voice breaking. But there was no sincerity in it. Not anymore. Maybe there had been once, but not now. Not after what I saw. I took a deep breath, trying to control the anger bubbling up inside of me. I needed to stay calm. I couldn't let her see how much this hurt. Because, to be honest, it did hurt. More than I could put into words. But I couldn't show it. Not now. Don't tell me what you wanted, Mara, I said, forcing the words through clenched teeth. Tell me why. Why him? What did I do wrong? Wasn't I enough for you? Or was he just more exciting? Was he everything I wasn't? Mara didn't say anything for a long moment. She just stared at me, her eyes welling up with tears. But this time, I didn't care. This wasn't about her tears. This wasn't about her remorse. This was about me getting some kind of answer, some kind of closure. Because, honestly, I was done. You always worked so much, she said, almost too quietly to hear. And I felt so alone. Alone? I felt my chest tighten as the words hit me. I had worked hard for us, for our future. But she didn't want that. She wanted someone who could give her attention every damn second of the day. Someone who would put her needs first. Daniel did that. I didn't. I swallowed the bitter taste in my mouth and took a step back. So that's it, huh? You just went to someone else instead of talking to me? Instead of being a damn partner? Her lips trembled as she shook her head. I didn't know how to fix it, Jackson. I didn't know what to do. It just happened. I couldn't stand hearing it anymore. I didn't care about her excuses. She had made her choice. And now I had to make mine. Get out of here, Mara, I said, my voice low and controlled. Get out of my life. I'm done with the lies. Her eyes widened, but she didn't argue. She just stood there, her hands trembling at her sides. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to protect her. I didn't have to worry about her feelings. I wasn't her damn fool anymore. I turned and walked out of the office, leaving her standing there in the silence, just as I had left her behind in my mind. When I got home, I felt like the air was different. The house felt too big, too quiet. But I wasn't afraid anymore, because I knew Mara wasn't coming back. Not after what I'd seen. And she wasn't going to ruin me. Not again. I don't know what I expected when I walked into that house. Maybe some part of me thought I'd walk in and find everything normal, like nothing had changed. But as soon as I stepped inside, the silence hit me like a wall. The kind of silence that screams louder than any argument could. I went straight to the bedroom, the place that used to feel like ours. Now it felt like a damn stage. Every little detail seemed to mock me. The photo frames on the wall, the comforter on the bed, it all felt like a lie now. Like I'd been living in a house of mirrors where everything reflected something that wasn't real. I stood there, just staring at the room for a moment, trying to make sense of what had happened. Trying to put the pieces together. How did we get here? How did this woman, the one I thought I knew so well, turn into someone I didn't even recognize? I could hear the faint buzz of the refrigerator in the kitchen, but it felt like the world was a million miles away. I moved to the dresser where her clothes were neatly folded. Clothes I'd helped pick out, thinking we were building something solid. There was a pair of shoes I didn't remember seeing before. Expensive, designer, shiny. The kind of thing she'd never been interested in before. I picked them up, turning them over in my hands. Who buys these, Mara? I thought. Who buys these when they're already playing someone else's game? I slammed the shoes down on the dresser and walked out of the room, my mind a hurricane of emotions. I couldn't even think straight. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something. I wanted to break everything she'd ever touched. But I didn't. Instead, I stood there in the hallway, feeling like I was suffocating in my own house. The anger was there, burning in my chest, but there was something else too. Something worse. It was the feeling of being betrayed. Mara's betrayal wasn't just about her sleeping with someone else. It wasn't about the physical act. It was about how she made me feel like I didn't matter. Like I was just a placeholder. How long had she been planning this? How long had she been checking out while I busted my ass trying to make sure we had a good life? I gave her everything. Everything. And she took it and threw it all away without a second thought. It wasn't just Daniel Pierce that hurt. It was the fact that she had stopped loving me long before she ever stepped into his arms. She'd checked out long before I even noticed. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at the walls. The more I thought about it, the more I realized there was no going back. I couldn't unsee what I'd seen. I couldn't pretend like I hadn't heard the way she laughed with him, the way she kissed him. That wasn't just a moment of weakness. That was her choosing someone else. I didn't know what to do with myself. But one thing was clear. I couldn't stay in that house anymore. I couldn't look at those same walls, those same rooms, and pretend like I still had a family. Because I didn't. I wasn't the husband anymore. I wasn't even the man she wanted. So, I did what I needed to do. I packed up a bag. Not much, just the essentials. Clothes, toiletries, my laptop, and a few things I couldn't leave behind. I didn't care if she came home tonight or not. By the time she did, I'd be long gone. I left the house before she even had a chance to reach out. I didn't want to talk to her. I didn't want to hear her excuses or her guilt. I just needed space. I needed air. I needed to get the hell out of there and figure out what the hell I was going to do with the mess she'd left me in. I drove for hours. Didn't really care where I was going. Just away. Away from her. Away from the house. Away from the life I'd built with someone who didn't even care enough to be honest with me. I ended up at a small motel on the outskirts of town. It was nothing special, but it didn't need to be. I didn't want luxury. I wanted peace. I wanted to be alone with my thoughts, to figure out the next steps. I needed time to think. Sitting there on the edge of the bed, I could feel the weight of everything sinking in. The marriage I thought was solid was a lie. The future I had envisioned with Mara was gone. The life I had worked so hard for, The life I had trusted her to share with me was shattered. I wanted revenge, yes. That was part of it. But more than that, I just wanted to feel something other than the ache in my chest. I wanted to feel like I was in control again. Because right now, I felt completely out of control. And that scared the hell out of me. I pulled out my phone and looked at it for a long moment, debating. But no. I wasn't going to call her. Not tonight. Not yet. Instead, I typed a single message. To no one in particular. Just something I needed to say. I'll figure this out. I always do. I hit send and tossed my phone on the bed. Maybe it was a promise to myself. Maybe it was a declaration that I wasn't done. I wasn't going to let Mara's betrayal break me. But at that moment, I didn't know what the future held. All I knew was that I had to survive this. I had to get through the next few days, the next few months, whatever it took. Because I wasn't going to let her win. I wasn't going to let anyone take everything I'd worked for. Not without a fight. The motel room felt like a prison, and for the first time in a long time, I had nothing to distract me. No work to throw myself into, no house to fix up, no clients to call back. It was just me and the cold, empty feeling inside that wouldn't leave. I couldn't escape it, no matter how much I tried. I couldn't just lie there and wallow forever. I needed to do something. I needed a plan. Because, as much as the anger and hurt weighed on me, I wasn't about to let Mara's actions define me. I couldn't let her win, even though she had already taken so much. The truth was, I was broken. I wasn't the man I used to be. Not the one who could trust his wife. Not the one who had a future in mind. Not the one who believed in the forever kind of love. That was gone. But I didn't want to stay broken. I couldn't let myself be consumed by the rage I felt toward her. Sure, I wanted to burn everything to the ground, but deep down, I knew that wasn't the way to handle this. I'd always prided myself on being the guy who fixed things. I was the one who put things back together when they broke. And right now, my life was in pieces. I thought about what to do next. I had a few options, but the more I sat with it, the more I realized that if I wanted to come out of this hole, I needed something bigger than revenge. Sure, I wanted her to feel the pain I felt. I wanted her to understand the weight of what she'd done. But if I just walked in and made a scene, what would that really accomplish? What would I get out of it? Would it make me feel better, or would it just keep me stuck in the same loop of anger and betrayal? I thought about the house we'd picked out together. It felt like a damn tomb now, full of memories I didn't want to remember. But I knew I couldn't go back to that place. I couldn't face her there, not without feeling like I was suffocating. Instead, I started thinking about the things I could control. I could rebuild myself. I could focus on work, focus on what I was good at. No more distractions, no more fake smiles. I'd become the person I needed to be, and that meant putting myself first. And then, as I sat there in the motel room, the idea hit me. What if I gave her a taste of her own medicine? Not in a petty, vengeful way, but in a way that would shake her up, make her see what she had thrown away. I knew I had to play this carefully. I couldn't just walk back in there and demand answers. No, I needed her to come to me. I needed her to feel the weight of what she'd lost without me saying a word. I grabbed my phone again and scrolled through my contacts, finding the number I needed. It was time to call in a favor. I reached out to a close friend of mine, someone who had helped me with a few business deals over the years. A guy named Victor. He owned a construction company, and he wasn't just about the work. He had connections. People who could help you when you needed something special. The plan formed quickly in my mind. I wasn't going to destroy her life, but I could make sure she never felt safe in it again. Not until she understood the consequences of her actions. I needed her to feel the void she'd left behind. I wasn't going to let her pretend it was all fine. Victor answered on the second ring. Jackson, my man. What's up? Victor, I need a favor, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I need you to get me something. Something that'll send a message. There was a pause on the other end, and then Victor's voice got serious. What kind of message, Jack? I ran my fingers through my hair, collecting my thoughts. I need someone to take a look at the house. Not just any old inspection. I need everything. Security systems, locks, windows, doors. I want the place to feel off. I want her to know someone's been there. Not too obvious, but enough to make her feel uncomfortable. I want her to worry. Victor didn't hesitate. Consider it done, my friend. I know some people who can make that happen. You want them to find anything specific? I gripped the phone tighter. I want her to know she's being watched. I want her to feel like she's lost control. But I don't want it to be traced back to me. Keep it clean. Another pause. Then Victor's low chuckle. You got it. But you'll owe me one, Jack. Big time. I'll make it up to you, I said, my mind already racing through the details. We wrapped up the conversation, and I felt a slight weight lift off my shoulders. Maybe it wasn't the perfect solution, but it was a start. I wasn't going to destroy her life, but I was going to make sure she understood that her betrayal wouldn't go unnoticed. It wouldn't just disappear into thin air. When I hung up, I knew it wasn't over. I knew there would be more to this. But at least I had a plan. I wasn't just sitting there, letting everything fall apart. I was doing something, and that felt better than anything Mara could ever give me. I sat back on the edge of the bed, letting out a slow breath. The anger was still there, gnawing at me, but now it had a purpose. It had a direction. I wasn't the man I was before. I wasn't the one she could walk all over. And when the time came, she would understand the price of betraying me. It wouldn't be quick. It wouldn't be pretty. But she'd feel it. And when it was done, I'd be standing on the other side, stronger than before. She had made a mistake. And I was going to make sure she remembered it. The days dragged on. I stayed at the motel for a few more nights, giving Victor some space to work his magic. I didn't check in with him constantly. I didn't need to. I knew how this worked. He had the connections, and he knew what he was doing. It wasn't about rushing it. It was about making sure everything was done right. It was about precision. Just like my work. I spent my days in a haze of unfinished thoughts and a gnawing feeling of emptiness. Some days, I'd try to get myself back into the rhythm of things. Checking in with clients, getting quotes for new jobs, handling business paperwork. But every time I opened my laptop or answered a call, my mind would drift back to her. To Mara. To everything that had fallen apart. Every time I went to sleep, I'd replay the scene in my mind. The kiss, her laugh, the way she'd looked at Daniel. I had the image burned into my brain like a scar I couldn't scrub away. I hated it. I hated myself for not seeing it sooner. How long had she been really gone? Was she already checked out when she started buying those expensive dresses? Was she already planning this affair when I thought we were still solid? But then there was the part of me that needed to stay calm. I knew if I let the rage take over, I'd make a mistake. I couldn't afford that. The anger was still there, deep inside, but I had to keep it in check. I couldn't let it consume me. So, I just focused on what I could control. I thought about my work. I thought about the future. I thought about making something good out of the mess that had been my life. But nothing helped silence the clock ticking in the back of my mind. Nothing could drown out the knowledge that Mara was still out there, probably pretending everything was fine. Maybe she'd even convinced herself that she'd done nothing wrong. Maybe she thought I'd just forget about it, move on like some kind of fool. But she didn't know me. Not really. I wasn't the guy who just sat back and let life walk all over him. Not anymore. The phone rang late one night, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was Victor. Got the job done, he said, his voice low, calm. I had some guys go through the house. Clean job like you asked. Some minor changes here and there. Nothing too obvious. But it'll send the message. She'll know someone's been inside. I also had a few things set up with the security system to make sure she feels watched. I felt a tight knot in my chest loosen. It was done. Good. Thanks, Victor, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. But inside, I could feel the weight lifting just a little bit. The plan was in motion now. Mara wouldn't be able to pretend anymore. It was time for her to face the consequences of what she'd done. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need to know how it all went down. It didn't matter. All that mattered was that it was set in motion. The pieces were moving. Anything else? Victor asked, sensing my silence. No, I said, almost automatically. But then, I hesitated. Actually, I want to keep the pressure on. Don't stop with just the house. Keep it going. Make her feel like things are slipping away from her. I want her to feel like she's losing control, like everything she thought she could count on is falling apart. Victor was quiet for a moment, then gave a soft chuckle. You're not pulling punches, huh? All right, Jack. I got you. I'll make sure she feels it. I hung up and leaned back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. A strange sense of calm washed over me. It wasn't peace. Not exactly. But it was something. It was the feeling of control that I hadn't had in weeks. I wasn't just a passive bystander in my own life anymore. I was doing something about it. Mara had taken something from me. My trust, my peace of mind, my belief in the future we'd promised each other. But I was taking something back, piece by piece. I knew she wouldn't see it coming. The next morning, I woke up with a plan. It was time to make my move. I packed up my things and headed back to the city, making my way back to the house. I didn't go straight there. I didn't want to walk in and face her just yet. I needed time. I needed to be ready for when the moment came. I took a few hours to think things through. I went for a long walk, just clearing my head, watching the city move around me. There was a strange comfort in the busyness, in the sound of people walking by, cars honking, the occasional street musician playing for tips. It reminded me that life went on, no matter how much my world had crumbled. I couldn't avoid Mara forever. She'd probably already noticed I was gone by now. She might even be wondering where I was, or trying to figure out what was going on. But I knew something she didn't. She didn't know that I wasn't going to make this easy for her. And I wasn't going to let her feel like she had any control over me anymore. I made my way back to the house by mid-afternoon. The streets were quiet, the sun high in the sky. I parked my van across the street, out of sight. The house looked like it always did. But I knew that wasn't the case anymore. The calm outside belied the storm I was about to bring. I sat there for a while, just watching it. Watching everything that had once been mine. Watching everything she had once promised. And then I walked toward the door. I wasn't sure what was going to happen when I walked inside, but I was ready. It was time to end the silence. Time to make Mara understand that nothing would ever be the same again. And for the first time in a long time, I felt ready. I stood in front of the door for a while, just looking at it. The door that had been the gateway to my life with Mara. The place where we'd spent so many nights, laughing, fighting, making promises we thought we'd keep forever. Now, it felt like a tomb. I took a deep breath and stepped inside. The house was quiet, eerily so. No sounds of Mara moving around, no music in the background, no smell of her cooking dinner. It felt hollow, like a shell of what it used to be. I walked in, the hardwood floors creaking under my boots. Each step felt heavier than the last. Mara's car was parked outside, so I knew she was home. She hadn't reached out to me, hadn't sent any texts or called. It was as if she was pretending like everything was still normal. But the truth was, I was done pretending. I moved through the house like a ghost. The living room, the kitchen, the hallway, everything was exactly as I remembered. But nothing was the same. I could almost feel the weight of the lies in the air. The house felt off, like the energy had shifted somehow. I made my way to the bedroom. That's when I saw her. She was sitting on the bed, her back turned to me, staring out the window. She hadn't heard me come in, or maybe she was pretending not to. But when I saw her there, sitting in that same spot she always did, where we used to talk about our dreams, our future, I felt the last little bit of my hope die. I wasn't sure how to approach her. I didn't know what to say. All the words I had rehearsed, all the things I thought I would do when I finally came back here, none of them seemed to matter anymore. Because, in that moment, I realized something. This wasn't about her anymore. This was about me. It was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, And my peace. Mara, I said, my voice steady, but with a weight to it that she wasn't used to hearing. She turned around slowly, like she was bracing herself for whatever came next. Her eyes were red, like she'd been crying. There was a look of guilt on her face, but also something else. Something colder. Jackson, she whispered, like she wasn't sure if she should be relieved or worried that I was home. I didn't want to hear her apologies. I didn't want her to try and explain herself. I didn't want to hear the same excuses that had been coming out of her mouth for months. No. This wasn't her moment to talk. It was mine. I saw everything, I said quietly, my hands gripping the doorframe. I saw you and Daniel. I saw the way you looked at him. The way you kissed him. You didn't even care that I was still out there, working my ass off to give us a life. She opened her mouth to say something, but I held up a hand to stop her. No, I said, voice sharp now. Don't try to defend it. I don't need your excuses. What I need, Mara, is for you to understand something. I'm done. I'm done with this. I'm done with you. And I'm done with the lie we've been living. She looked at me then, really looked at me, as if seeing me for the first time in a long time. Her eyes softened for a second. Guilt, shame, maybe a little fear, and she stood up slowly. Jackson, please, she whispered. I never meant for this to happen. Doesn't matter anymore, I cut her off. You did it. And it's too late. I can't go back. You had your chance, Mara. And you threw it all away for a guy who couldn't even respect you enough to keep his distance. The silence stretched between us. I could see the tears welling up in her eyes, and for a moment I felt a flicker of something deep inside me, a small, distant part of me that still wanted to help her. But that part of me was buried deep under everything else. It was too late for that now. What are you going to do? She asked quietly, her voice trembling. There was an almost pleading look in her eyes. She didn't want to lose me. I could see that. But the truth is, she already had. The moment she chose him over me, I lost her. I'm not here to make you feel better, Mara, I said. I'm here to make sure you understand the consequences of what you did. I'm here to make sure you realize that when you cross a line like that, you don't get to just walk away like nothing happened. I could see the panic rising in her chest. She wasn't ready to face what was happening. She wasn't ready for the world she had built to come crashing down. And that's when I realized, this wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about getting back at her for what she did. This was about reclaiming the power I had lost. I turned toward the door. I've already packed my things. I'm done here. I'm not coming back. Not now, not ever. She reached out to me, her voice desperate. Jackson, please. Don't leave. We can fix this. We can. No, I said, cutting her off again, my voice steady, almost cold now. There's nothing to fix. This is over. And you know it. I stepped toward the door, my hand on the knob. I wasn't looking for a fight anymore. I wasn't looking for any more answers. I was looking for closure. But before I walked out, I turned back to her one last time. You made a choice, Mara, I said softly. And I'm choosing me now. With that, I left. I walked out of that house for the last time, knowing that nothing would ever be the same. But in some strange way, that was a relief. I had been living in the shadow of what we were supposed to be. But now, for the first time in a long time, I was walking toward who I was supposed to be. And for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. Thank you for watching this video to the end. What did you like most about this story? Write your answers in the comments. See you in the next video.